Welcome to the podcast Human Relationships. Ανθρώπων σχέσεις. Hello and welcome. I'm Ioannis Soteropoulos and this is Ανθρώπων σχέσεις. Human Relationships. Here we explore the psychology of relationships, the pressures of modern life, and how we can connect in a more meaningful way with ourselves and with other people, with poetry as our starting point. Welcome to another episode of Human Relationships, where we explore how the way we relate to others often mirrors the relationship we have with ourselves. I'm Ioannis Soteropoulos, and today's episode is personal, crucial, and honestly long overdue. We are talking about love and self-esteem. And the question behind it is simple but powerful. How important is self-love before we love someone else? It's something all of us have wondered at some point, or maybe we've lived it, sometimes painfully, because many relationships don't end because love disappears. They end because we lose ourselves inside them. So today we're not just asking, can we love someone else if we don't love ourselves? We're also asking, what happens when we try? In this episode, we'll explore what self-esteem really is, what self-love actually means in practice, and how low self-esteem can quietly shape the kinds of relationship we choose, tolerate, or struggle to live. We'll also talk about how self-esteem affects boundaries, communication, jealousy, fear of abandonment, and emotional dependence. And as always, we'll bring this back to something practical. What can you do starting today to build a healthier relationship with yourself so your relationships with others become calmer, clearer, and more real? Just to be clear, self-love is not perfection. It's not constant confidence. And it's definitely not narcissism. Self-love is a decision to treat yourself with basic respect, even on the days you feel uncertain, rejected, or not enough. It's the difference between living your life asking, am I good enough for you? And living your life knowing I am allowed to have needs, limits, and dignity. And this matters more than ever today because we live in a world where people are constantly measured by productivity, measured by appearance, measured by attention, measured by comparison. So many of us enter love already anxious, already trying to prove ourselves, already afraid of being replaced. And when love becomes a place where you have to earn safety, it stops feeling like love. It starts feeling like survival. So here's what we'll do together today. First, we'll define self-esteem and self-love in a grounded way. Then we'll look at how self-esteem creates traps inside relationships like overgiving, people-pleasing, fear of abandonment, and staying where you're not respected. Then I'll give you practical tools you can apply immediately, not theory, real steps, and we'll close with poetry, because poetry has always been my way of translating emotions into truth. So, wherever you are right now, take a breath. And as you listen, keep this question quietly in the background. In love, do I feel more like myself or less like myself? Let's begin. Let's start with the foundations. What is self-esteem? Self-esteem is the way we see ourselves and the value we believe we have. It's our inner sense of self-worth. It's the quiet voice in the background that answers questions like, am I enough? Do I matter? Do I deserve respect? Am I allowed to take up space? And here's the important part. Self-esteem is not only what you think about yourself when things go well. It's what you believe about yourself when you make mistakes, when you feel rejected, when you are not chosen, or when life becomes difficult. Now, self-love is not selfishness. It's not narcissism. Self-love is self-acceptance. It's care. It's learning to treat yourself with dignity. It's being able to say, I can be imperfect and still worthy. Self-love doesn't mean you never feel insecure. It means you don't abandon yourself in your insecurity. And this matters because the relationship we have with ourselves becomes the template for the relationships we build with others. If deep down you believe you are not worthy, you will often overgive to earn love, tolerate behavior that hurts you, fear abandonment constantly, struggle to express needs clearly, or become dependent on external validations to feel safe. This is why self-esteem is not just a personal topic, it's a relationship topic. The psychologist Nathaniel Branden, who helped popularize the modern understanding of self-esteem, emphasized something essential. Self-esteem is not something other people give us. It is something we build from the inside, day by day, through our choices, our behavior, and the way we treat ourselves when nobody is watching. So the real question is not, do people love me? The deeper question is, do I live my life in a way that makes me respect myself? And that brings us to what research and psychology have observed over time. When self-esteem is low, relationships often become a place where we try to repair our identity. We unconsciously search for someone to prove that we are enough. But when self-esteem is healthier, we don't enter relationships looking to be completed. We enter relationships to share, to build, to support, to grow. In other words, love becomes a choice, not a dependency. And why self-esteem shapes our life so strongly? Because relationships activate our deepest emotional system: attachment, security, fear, belonging. If your self-worth is fragile, love can feel like constant anxiety, constant monitoring, constant fear of losing the person, constant need for reassurance. You can love someone deeply and still suffer, because your nervous system is interpreting love as risk. But when self-esteem is stronger, love feels more like emotional steadiness, honesty, self-respect, and mutual freedom. It becomes easier to set boundaries, easier to communicate, easier to leave situations that harm you, easier to trust without losing yourself. Self-esteem doesn't make relationships perfect, but it makes them healthier because it changes what you tolerate, what you ask for, and what you believe you deserve. And I want to add something very important here, because we live in a world that constantly challenges self-worth. Many people are trying to build love while living in exhaustion, comparison, and pressure. Social media, the dating culture of endless options, and the pace of modern life can quietly push people into the mindset of, I have to be exceptional to be chosen. And that mindset destroys peace. So in this episode, we are not talking about self-love as a trend. We are talking about it as a foundation. Because The healthier your relationship with yourself becomes, the less love feels like a test you might fail. And now that we've defined self-esteem and why it matters, let's go into the next part. What happens when self-esteem is low and how it creates traps inside relationships. So let's talk now about what happens when self-esteem is low, because this is where many relationship patterns begin. Self-esteem influences the choices we make in love, often more than we realize. When we value ourselves, we don't build our identity through someone else's approval. We enjoy love, but we don't depend on it to feel worthy. But when self-esteem is low, relationships can become something else. They become a place where we try to fix an inner emptiness. We look for someone to reassure us, to stabilize us, to prove that we are lovable. And that is where the traps begin. Trap 1. Loving to be chosen, not loving to share. When self-esteem is low, love can feel like a competition. You are not just relating to someone, you are trying to be enough for them. So instead of asking, do I feel safe with this person? Are we compatible? Do I feel respected? You end up asking, am I good enough? Will they stay? What do I have to do to be chosen? And if love feels like performance, it becomes exhausting. Trap 2. Fear of abandonment. Low self-esteem often creates a deep fear of being left, and that fear changes behavior. It can lead to overthinking messages, needing constant reassurance, interpreting distance as a rejection, panic when the other person is not immediately available, or staying silent about your needs because you think honesty will push them away. This is how people start living emotionally on edge inside relationships. Trap 3. People-pleasing and self-erasure. When you do not fully believe you deserve love as you are, you begin to negotiate your worth. You become easy to love by becoming small. You avoid conflict. You hide your needs. You say yes when you want to say no. You forgive too quickly. You tolerate disrespect and call it understanding. And over time, you don't just lose a relationship, you lose yourself. Trap 4. Staying in unhealthy relationships. This is one of the most painful consequences. When self-esteem is low, loneliness can feel more frightening than harm. So people stay even when the relationship damages them psychologically. Sometimes it's because they believe, this is the best I can get. No one else will want me. At least I'm not alone. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I'm too sensitive. This is not love. This is survival. And this is why low self-esteem is a risk factor for dependency patterns in relationships. You can attach to a person not because they are safe, but because living feels unbearable. Trap 5. Jealousy, control, and insecurity cycles. Low self-esteem often feeds jealousy, not because someone is unfaithful, but because the inner world is unstable. You don't trust because you don't feel secure in your own worth. So small things feel huge. A delayed reply becomes a threat. A like on Instagram becomes betrayal. A night out becomes anxiety. These can lead to checking, monitoring, questioning, and emotional tension that slowly suffocates intimacy. And let me ask you something honestly. How many times have you seen someone stay in a relationship that did not treat them well simply because they were afraid to be alone? Or maybe it happened to you, not because you didn't understand the situation, but because the fear of emptiness was stronger than the desire for health and peace. This is what low self-esteem can do. It can make the wrong relationship feel safer than no relationship. So the key truth here is low self-esteem doesn't mean you cannot love. It means your love can become distorted by fear. You may love genuinely, but at the same time tolerate too much, ask for too little, and abandon yourself to keep someone close. And the tragedy is that this often creates the exact outcome you fear: distance, conflict, emotional exhaustion, and disconnection. So the next question is practical and important. If self-esteem shapes our love life so deeply, how can we strengthen it? What can we do in real life, starting now, to build a healthier relationship with ourselves? Let's move to practical tools. Practical tips to cultivate self-esteem. So how do we work on self-esteem in a real way? Not in a cliché way, not in a just think positive way, but in a way that actually changes how you feel, how you choose, and how you show up in relationships. I am going to share practical steps you can start immediately. And I want to say something important before we begin. Self-esteem is not built in one big moment. It is built in small repetitions. It is built through how you speak to yourself, what you tolerate, what you practice, and what you choose every day. Number 1. Self-observation without judgment. Start by noticing your inner dialogue. What do you tell yourself when make a mistake, feel rejected, don't get attention, don't meet an expectation? Many people live with an inner critic that speaks like an enemy. A useful shift is this. Instead of saying, "What is wrong with me?" ask, "What is happening inside me right now?" This creates space, a safe space, and self-esteem begins with space. Number 2. Self-knowledge and journaling. Spend time understanding who you are and who you perform to be. Ask yourself, what are my values? What do I want from love? What patterns keep repeating in my relationships? What do I need to feel safe? How do I keep asking others to give me that I haven't learned to give myself? Journaling is not just emotional expression, it's emotional clarity. Even 10 minutes, a few times a week, can help you see yourself more honestly. Number 3. Build self-compassion instead of self-attack. This is one of the most transformative tools. Self-compassion does not mean excuses. It means you treat yourself like someone you care about. If your friend made a mistake, you would not say, "You are pathetic, you will never improve." You would say, "It's okay, you're human, what can we learn from this?" So try practicing that tone with yourself. You can even use this phrase, "This is hard right now, and I am allowed to be human." Self-compassion is one of the strongest foundations for stable self-esteem because it teaches your nervous system that you are safe with yourself even when life is messy. Number 4. Strengthen boundaries. Self-esteem grows when you stop betraying yourself. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you send your system the message, "My needs don't matter." Every time you stay silent when you're hurt, you send the message, my truth is dangerous. So, if you want to strengthen your self-esteem, practice boundaries. This connects directly to episode 2, where we spoke about boundaries as an act of love. Even one boundary can be a turning point. For example, I am not available for late-night arguments. I will not accept shouting. I need time to think before I answer. I can't be your only emotional support. Number 5. Keep small promises to yourself. This is a powerful and underrated practice. Self-esteem is built by trust, and the first person you need to trust is yourself. So, choose one small promise daily. Go for a 15-minute walk, drink water, finish a task you've been avoiding, journal for 5 minutes, sleep at a better time, speak kindly to yourself once. It's not about productivity. It's about integrity. When you keep small promises, you become someone you can rely on. Number 6. Reframe comparison. Nowadays, comparison is one of the biggest self-esteem destroyers. We compare bodies, careers, relationships, lifestyles, confidence, and we forget we are comparing our behind the scenes to other people's edited highlights. So a practical habit is this. When you catch yourself comparing, ask, what need is this comparison revealing? Is it attention, safety, meaning, worth? Then respond to the need, not to the illusion. Number 7. Practice gratitude and self-recognition. Write down 3 things every evening. 1 thing you did well, 1 thing you handled better than before, 1 thing you appreciated about yourself. Not big things, small things. Self-esteem is not built only by achievements. It is built by recognizing your own existence as valuable. Number 8. Low self-esteem often comes with emotional confusion. So, practice naming emotions. Disappointed, rejected, ashamed, anxious, lonely, overwhelmed. When you name emotions, you reduce their power. You move from chaos to understanding. Number 9. Poetry, art, and meaning. And yes, I'll say this because it is part of the identity of this podcast. Poetry and art help us process emotions and transform pain into language. They help us feel seen. They help us create meaning. Sometimes self-esteem begins when you realize, my feelings make sense, my story matters, my experience has value. Number 10. When needed, support and healing. And finally, sometimes self-esteem work requires deeper healing. If you have a history of rejection, trauma, or emotional neglect, it makes sense that self-worth feels fragile. So seeking professional support is not weakness, it is self-respect. So self-esteem is built through awareness, compassion, boundaries, consistency, and daily acts of self-respect. You do not build self-love by forcing confidence. You build it by stopping the ways you abandon yourself. And now, let's look at what happens inside relationships when self-love is missing, because the signs are often clearer than we think. Let's talk about the effects of lack of self-love in relationships. When self-love is missing. Because the absence of self-love doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like someone who seems fine on the outside, but is constantly anxious on the inside, and very often it shows up through patterns that repeat again and again. I'm going to name some of the most common effects, and as you listen, I want you to gently ask yourself, do I recognize this in my own relationships, past or present? Number 1. Insecurities and jealousy. When self-esteem is low, love can feel unstable. Not because the other person is doing something wrong, but because internally you are always afraid they will leave, afraid they'll find someone better, afraid you're not enough. And jealousy often comes from that fear. It's not always about the other person's behavior, it's about the inner belief, I am replaceable. When that belief lives in you, even small triggers can create big reactions. And over time, jealousy can poison intimacy because love becomes surveillance instead of trust. Number 2. Difficulty trusting. A lack of self-love often makes it difficult to trust, even when there is no real reason to mistrust. Because if you don't feel safe inside yourself, you struggle to feel safe with someone else. You start reading between the lines constantly, you analyze tone, you interpret silence as rejection, you look for signs of danger. That may feel like protection, but it creates chronic stress inside the relationship. And ironically, the more you try to protect yourself through suspicion, the more distant the relationship becomes. Number 3. Excessive dependence on a partner. This is a very common one. When we don't love ourselves, we unconsciously ask love to fix us. We want someone else to regulate our emotions, calm our anxiety, confirm our worth, give us meaning, fill the empty space inside. But no human being can carry that role forever, because love is not meant to be a rescue mission. It is meant to be a partnership. When dependence takes over, the relationship becomes heavy, and the partner can feel pressure, responsibility, and guilt, while the person with low self-esteem feels fear, panic, and instability. Number 4. People-pleasing and loss of identity. This is where many people quietly disappear inside relationships. When you don't believe you are lovable as you are, you start editing yourself. You become what the other person wants. You avoid expressing needs. You become agreeable. You shallow your discomfort. You confuse peace with silence. But silence becomes resentment. And over time, you don't just lose your joy, you lose your sense of self. A relationship should not require you to shrink. Number 5. Overgiving and emotional exhaustion. People with low self-esteem often overgive in love. They think, if I give enough, I will be safe. If I do enough, I will be chosen. So they carry too much. They fix, they save, they tolerate, they sacrifice. But love that depends on sacrifice becomes imbalanced, and imbalance eventually becomes exhaustion. Number 6. Staying where you're not respected. Perhaps the hardest consequence is this. When your self-esteem is low, you may stay in relationships that harm you psychologically, simply because being alone feels worse. You tolerate disrespect, emotional coldness, inconsistency, manipulation, sometimes even humiliation. Because living would require one thing, believing you deserve better. And that belief is exactly what self-love gives you. Number 7. Confusing intensity with love. This is a subtle but important one. When self-love is missing, people can confuse intensity with intimacy. Constant highs and lows can feel like passion, Anxiety can feel like love. Uncertainty can feel like excitement. But the truth is, a healthy relationship is not a constant emotional storm. Peace is not boredom. Stability is not lack of passion. Safety is not weakness. So, when self-love is missing, relationships often become more anxious, more dependent, more unstable, and more exhausting. Not because love is impossible, but because love becomes mixed with fear. And that's why building self-esteem is not something separate from relationships. It is the foundation that determines whether love becomes a space of growth or a space of self-loss. And now, as always, I want us to pause for poetry, because poetry can hold what psychology explains, the emotional truth underneath these patterns. And now, let's move into the poetry section. As I've said many times, poetry is the original source of inspiration of this podcast. It's the language that can hold what we often struggle to say directly: our fears, our longing, or our self-doubt, and also our dignity. Because the truth is, the way we love others is deeply shaped by the way we speak to ourselves when nobody is watching. Today's episode is about love and self-esteem, and the question underneath it is, do I stay loyal to myself inside love, or do I abandon myself to be chosen? For today, I chose two poetic moments. One is a complete poem by Konstantinos Cavafis, C.P. Cavafy, and the second is a short line by Kiki Dimoula from one of her poems, which I'll share briefly at the end. C.P. Cavafy, As Much As You Can. The poem is translated by myself from the original Greek. And if you cannot shape your life the way you want, at least try this much. As much as you can, do not demean it. Amid the constant closeness of the world, amid the endless movement and talk, do not demean it by dragging it along, by roaming often and exposing it to the daily foolishness of relationships and social company until it becomes like a stranger, a burdensome thing. This poem is deeply connected to self-esteem because it speaks about dignity. Cavafy isn't saying control everything. He is saying even if you cannot shape life exactly as you want, you can still protect it from degradation. And what degrades us very often is not a single dramatic moment. It's the slow erosion that happens through excessive exposure, excessive adaptation, excessive social pressure, and the endless need to be acceptable. In the language of today's episode, this is self-love in practice. Not performing constantly, not abandoning yourself just to stay connected, and not allowing your inner life to become something foreign and heavy. It's a reminder that self-respect is not selfish. It's what keeps you whole, so that when you love someone else, you don't disappear. And I want to add a thought here, because self-love is also about leaving what keeps shrinking you. Love should not constantly make you doubt yourself. It should not reduce you. It should not teach you that your needs are too much or your sensitivity is a problem. Sometimes the most self-loving act is not staying and trying harder, Sometimes it is living with dignity, clearly, without drama and without humiliation. Not escaping, not disappearing, not running in panic, but living with your head held high because you are no longer willing to negotiate your worth. Because self-esteem is difficult to build and very easy to destroy. And if someone cannot recognize your value, you don't have to prove it by suffering. And that brings me to the line by Kiki Dimoula, which I'll share very briefly. In Greek it goes like «Έχω κι εγώ ένα σωρό αποθυμένους ουρανούς, μα δεν σκοτώνω άστρα». And in English it is like I, too, have so many unfulfilled skies within me, but I do not kill stars. To me, this line is a definition of self-esteem. It acknowledges longing, pain, and what we did not receive, but it refuses destruction. It refuses self-harm. It refuses to turn disappointment into cruelty towards others or towards the self. This is self-love, not denying the emptiness, but refusing to betray your own dignity because of it. And what I want you to notice is this. Poetry reminds us that self-love is not arrogance, it's not superiority, it's not perfection. It is a decision to stay on your own side, to stop abandoning yourself, to stop negotiating your worth, to stop shrinking in order to be loved. Because the most stable love does not ask you to disappear, it asks you to arrive. Before we close, I want to leave you with a few questions. Of course, not to overwhelm you, but to help you reflect honestly, because self-esteem is not built through theory. It's built through awareness and practice. You can think about these questions privately. You can write them down, or you can message me your thoughts if you feel comfortable. When you're in love, do you feel more like yourself or less like yourself? Where do you seek validation from others instead of giving it to yourself? What behavior have you tolerated in the past because you were afraid of being alone? When you feel anxious in a relationship, what story do you tell yourself about your worth? What is the one boundary you avoid setting because you fear losing the person? If you truly believed you were enough, what would you change in the way you choose love? And here's a final one, perhaps the most important. What would self-love look like this week in one small action? Not a huge transformation, not a perfect version of you, just one real, concrete action. Let's now close with the heart of today's episode. Self-love is not a luxury. It's not something we do only after we fix ourselves. Self-love is the foundation of every relationship we will ever have, because the longest relationship of your life is the one you have with yourself. When self-esteem is stronger, love becomes calmer. You don't chase, you choose. You don't beg, you express. You don't shrink, you remain. You don't stay where you are not respected because you remember your value. And I want to say this clearly. You do not need to become perfect to be worthy of love. You need to become loyal to yourself. Because the real goal is not to be loved by everyone. The goal is to be loved by someone while you still recognize yourself. If anything from today's episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment or message me on Instagram or send me an email. You can find all details in the episode's description. Thank you for listening to Human Relationships. And remember, the most important relationship is the one you have with yourself. So treat yourself with a little more respect, a little more gentleness, and a little more love, day by day. Take care.